Welcome to FinTech Brews and News, brought to you by Central Payments and Falls Fintech. I'm Nikkee and Rhody.
And I'm Trent Sorbe.
Founders, co-founders, payments professionals, and, well, just people who love brews. This is a place to get a behind-the-scenes look at unique partnerships and ways to bridge the financial gap between banking, startups, and the entire fintech industry. Whether it's a beer or coffee or something else, there's certain to be a brew in every episode. After all, how do we function in this space without it? Each episode, you're sure to take away some good stuff going on in the financial technology space. So without further ado, let's grab a brew. Hey everybody, welcome back to FinTech Brews. So we can't quite decide if we're coffee people or beer people, probably both. Just kind of how we came up with the name.
It works.
It totally works. And I think the verdict is that you have to have a heavy dose of both to work at Central Payments. So glad you guys tuned in today. I'm Nikkee and Rhody.
And I'm Trent Sorbe.
And are you decaf or fully loaded today?
Always loaded to the max.
Do you remember that time you said, I drink foo-foo coffee?
Yes.
And you just take yours black?
Yes.
Lame.
No foo-foo coffee.
Yeah.
I can smell it when I come into the office.
Yeah, well, we'll get you there, just like beer.
Cheers.
We'll get you there. Cheers. So today, we're really going to spend a little bit more time unpacking Falls Fintech. If you tuned into the last episode, it was all about rolling back into CBKC, CDFI status, the payments division, and how we founded the accelerator. So today, we're going to go kind of part two into that and how we got here with the accelerator.
I think it's a great spot to pick up. If you think about when we decided this accelerator thing is what we wanted to do and why we were going to do it, I think this is a great opportunity to kind of showcase some of these awesome companies that have come through, talk a little bit about what the future plans are, and then again, really encourage people to apply to be a part of one of our cohorts. Yeah. And so I'm excited to kind of give you an opportunity to talk about these companies that I know are so near and dear to you.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do it.
This will be very exciting. So if we left off with the idea of why we thought an accelerator made sense, talk about that first cohort. If you go back in time and you think about what an interesting experience, I think it's going to be great background for listeners to understand what we saw in those applicants. Falls Fintech didn't exist. Nobody knew about it at that time.
Well, first of all, you're scratching at the PTSD itch a little bit because it really was something I've never personally experienced before of being thrown in to do so much in such a short order. You
had like 4 months. I don't understand why that was so stressful for you.
Let's see. Last episode, we talked about Luke and the gifts he brings to the table. So this one, I'm going to highlight Heather Berg a bit. She keeps us on track, on point, on budget, on task, which is really, really, really hard to do. So as soon as we said yes to the accelerator, I knew exactly who I needed to scoop up.
Talk about the team. Bring everybody up to speed on who the team.
Sure, absolutely. So rewind, we're back in August of 2019. The board says, let's do this thing. Let's go for the accelerator. Let's serve these folks and you rock and roll. Okay, so we knew we had Luke in the following spring, but meanwhile, it was a team of just you and I, part-time you or part-time you and me. So I knew I had to pick somebody that was going to be everything that I'm not. Type A, very detail-oriented, budget-minded, all the things. And so we picked up Heather to fill that spot. She started in September. And I'll never forget during this interview, she said, okay, so wait, what are you doing? What's an accelerator? How is this going to functionally work? And when do you want to launch this thing? And I said, well, we're going to roll it out and go public in October 28th of 2019 at Money 2020. She said, so 7 weeks. I'm like, well, 6 weeks. And I'm pretty sure she threw up in her mouth. But she said yes anyway, joined the team, and we made it happen.
So like first week, she's like, I'm going to Vegas. Let's figure it out.
Guess we're going to Vegas. And I guess I have to fundamentally build at least the framework of what this accelerator is going to look like. And so we did just that. October 19, we went out to Vegas and we had a reception where we launched with some friends in the industry about this accelerator, what it is, how it's going to work. We talked about the layout of bringing companies into Sioux Falls, South Dakota for 10 weeks at that time.
How many people told you that? I remember when you would talk about the concept at that time, didn't even have a name. Falls Fintech didn't even exist at that time. But when you would say, I want to do it in Sioux Falls and I want these companies to come to Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
Like, how many of them just sort of looked at you and said, have you lost your mind?
Well, what's funny is I thought they all would. I thought every single person on the planet was going to say, Sioux what? Falls where? What is this thing? I couldn't find South Dakota on a map if I tried. But here's what's interesting is that wasn't a deterrent. There was a natural hesitancy from the Manhattans of the world, LA and so on, but nothing that scared people off. I thought it was going to be a much bigger hurdle than it actually ended up being, which was interesting. So when we packed this penthouse suite place at the Venetian out in Vegas with a launch reception for Falls Fintech, I heard for the next 2 days at the conference what a buzz we made and how interesting this was, and things like, wow, that was the best party of the event. I'm not sure if that was necessarily, me induced or not.
It was a good party.
It was a great party. And anyway, a lot of attraction, a lot of fintech showed up that were at 2020. And of course, a lot of our friends in the industry that wanted to help put some legs under this, call it sponsors, if you will.
And that really got interesting to me is when we started to talk to our friends and we explained why we wanted to do this for our business. So many of them looked at it and said, man, this would be good for my business too. I'm part of this payments ecosystem and I'm looking at ways in which we can expand our market. I got to get involved in this Falls Fintech thing because, what's good for Central Payments is good for me as Central Payments processing partner or their card fulfillment partner or whatever happens to be.
I think people really look at us, not tongue in cheek here, but I really think people look at us as early adopters. There's kind of the fast followers and that whole school of thought, but we really do sit on the cutting edge. A lot of that comes out of your brain factory, and oftentimes I want to knock you down, but it ends up being, let this not inflate your ego, but usually the right move. And so I appreciate that. So we're really on this early adopter swing, and people look at us and go, wow, that's amazing. Wow, that's innovative. Wow, that's creative. Wow, that's different. And I'm super proud to be on a team that has that kind of, that bent, if you will.
So you would think, okay, this thing gets put together at lightning speed. No major PR firms, no huge splash. It was very, very organic.
It was.
It is Luke the Fintern out there trying to drum up some social media attention. One would think that the first group of applicants for that first cohort was like, oh, where did you scrape these folks up? Because no one had heard of you. That really wasn't the case. Talk about that.
It wasn't at all. As a matter of fact, we thought for sure, we're like, okay, so end of October, you go to Vegas. We have November and December to find fintechs, start interviewing, select them so that we can do everything from due diligence and background checks and framing the curriculum to kick off in March of 2020.
And if there was 5, you were praying for 6 applicants.
Oh, that's right.
If I could get 6,
then
great.
I've got a cohort.
I can find 5.
I've got a cohort.
Right.
If I've got 6, I can make a cohort. And wouldn't you know it, we had over 30 applicants our first cohort in such a short order. And you're right, not bottom of the barrel people. We had great selections, and people think, oh, cute. So right outside of Sioux Falls. Nope. Our first cohort was made up out of a company in Manhattan, LA, Salt Lake City, Utah, Spokane, Washington, D.C., and a representative from Nairobi, Kenya. So our very first cohort spanned not only in the United States, but worldwide, which was really remarkable. And the products, it really kind of comes down to, there's this tug of war seemingly of, do you bet on the founders? Do you bet on the product? If you're lucky enough to get a combination of both. And I really feel like in cohort 1, it was a lot of a combination of both.
I remember when we were going through the first round of applicants, and I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, these are all much higher caliber than I expected.
That's right.
And that's where I think everybody got very excited at that point, because we realized that, on a shoestring budget with very little PR, we saw what I believe someday could be some of the more exciting startups in fintech today.
That's right. 2 of these 5 in the first cohort are rounding out implementation with central payments as we speak. And so they are just knocking on the door of full market launch with a customized implementation. And we reduced all those barriers to entry to help them get there. And honestly, we constantly hear this feedback of, I don't know where I would have been or where I would be if it wasn't for central payments and Falls Fintech, which kind of tugs at my old heartstrings,
Yes, they know just what to say to you. The companies that came through cohort 1, a couple of them, like you said, are coming into implementation. The central payments folks, you've passed the baton to us. We've put them right through the due diligence machine and put them through the implementation machine, and we're right there with them. So it's so exciting. I think, what do you tell the companies that aren't ready to go to implementation yet? How do you keep them motivated to say, look, in many cases, keep working on raising the money. We're here for you. We're not going anywhere. 2 are coming out, but more to come. What do you kind of do to keep the momentum going there on that first cohort?
Yeah.
Because they're going on, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going on over a year now since they were here.
That's right. Well, let's not forget that we launched this thing in, again, March 2020, that dreaded month that nobody will seemingly forget. We brought these 5 companies to Sioux Falls. Trent, they had their groceries bought, their Airbnb reserved for 10 weeks. They were going to be physically on site here in Sioux Falls for nearly 3 months, and came in on a Monday. We kicked off. Everybody was wildly excited. And lo and behold, by Thursday, we ended up sending them all home.
I'll never forget that drive home, calling you and saying, look, I think we have a problem. COVID, the pandemic, this is getting serious fast. And I think we need to do another one of our special pivots, but we need to do this one quickly. These folks probably need to go home to their families.
That's
Talk about that experience during those 3 or 4 days when, they come in completely excited and motivated and ready to just hit the ground running. And then all of a sudden, 48 hours later, we're trying to decide what are we going to do?
That's right. Well, I think one company sticks out in particular. When we came in that Thursday morning and we said, look, guys, it's pretty clear that we need to put a pin in this, send you all home, and decide where we go from here. One guy, I really thought he was going to lose it, because earlier that morning, he had gotten a call from an investor that said, this pandemic thing is really starting to take a funky shape. I don't know what it's going to mean. I'm pulling out on my investment. So this one company that was getting a ton of traction seemingly lost a key investor, lost their accelerator, and all the momentum that they had coming into spring of 2020 was fundamentally ripped out from underneath him.
Our news is the easiest of the news he got that day.
Right. And so it was really tough. Everybody else was supportive, understood that it is what it is, and we'll figure it out. So we sat around the conference table and said, what do you guys want to do? Where do you
guys ever heard of this thing called Zoom? I think we could use this thing.
Well, and it was funny because Heather had done such a beautiful job organizing speakers to fly into Sioux Falls and contribute in person, whiteboarding sessions and lectures and panels and the whole shoot and match. And we had no idea fundamentally how we were going to pull off a virtual accelerator. And so we thought and put the option on the table, guys, do you want to just put a pin in this? We'll pick it up in the fall and see where that lands. And wouldn't you know, every single one of those founders says, nope, let's figure it out and roll through it together. And I'll never forget that moment, because it taught me a lot about tenacity. And when the going gets tough, you literally just keep rolling. Like, this isn't an option. And these entrepreneurs, we've seen it in cohort 1 for sure, cohort 2, cohort 3. Entrepreneurs are some of the most resilient and scrappy people on the planet, that it doesn't matter what gets in their way. Sure, you take a few hits and you got to be down for a while, but they really rolled up their sleeves and said, let's go. What
did it do to around the camaraderie of that group? I know that group is special. I mean, anytime I think you're in the inaugural class of anything, it's unique and special. But talk about, together, boom, we're all gone. Now we're virtual. How are we going to make this work? Talk about the camaraderie of that group.
Yeah, I think being here, expecting to be together and starting at least the first couple days together, they formed this really interesting bond and built some relational equity right out of the gate. So that lent itself very nicely to everybody going back home. We took about 3 or 4 days to contact everybody, say, let's do this via Zoom. How are you? Can this work?
What's COVID?
Yeah. And it really, I half-heartedly joked that I was maybe, hungover for a day or two, feeling sorry for myself.
You had multiple forms of hangovers during those 3 or 4 days.
Emotional.
Yeah.
Cough.
Yeah, all of it. All of it.
So yeah, it was really an interesting kind of journey. But that following week, we had a plan. Things got a little out of sync. We're very intentional about how we structure our curriculum to be kind of feeding off of each other week by week. But we made it work. They are the strongest participants in the Alumni Network, and are, like I said, 2 of the 5 are in market.
Including the one that you said thought he lost his investor, thought he lost his accelerator.
That's right.
He's coming to market next month.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right. So it's really great, again, to see that resiliency. And when the going gets tough, you really, I would put money on the entrepreneurial kind of sector 1,000 times over than anything else. So it was really great. But one thing they kind of got gypped out of was a demo day. We did everything virtual. We didn't get the chance to showcase their progress, put them in front of investment communities and other kind of leaders to showcase what they've done. So that was an interesting challenge. But here's where it gets better, is you fast forward to fall of 2020, and we went into that cohort. So I should make sure the audience knows we run 2 cohorts a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. So it was our second cohort, same year, still a pandemic year. I was dead set on the idea that we had to be in person. And Luke and Heather both
stubbornly dead set.
Stubborn, yeah. So it's an attribute that I've had since knee-high to a grasshopper. But Luke and Heather said, Nikkee, give it up. It can't be in person. So we said, all right, what if we bookend this thing? And we have fall of 2020 where they're on site the first week, they go virtual for 10 weeks, and then they're on site the last week. That's what we proposed to the companies that applied to cohort 2, and it worked out exactly like that.
You would think that if you're a prospective company in cohort 2 and this thing's going to start out virtual, that's a deterrent, right?
Yeah.
You're going to think like, virtual? Come on, what am I going to really learn here? What am I doing? Did you see a drop off in the types of applicants, the number of applicants, the quality of the applicants because you were going virtual?
Not at all. Actually, I think people just understood that's the way of the world. That's what we're dealing with right now, and that's just okay. I think people appreciated the flexibility that even though we believe that being on site will fundamentally serve folks better in the long run, that wasn't an option in the fall of 2020. So actually our application pool from 1 to 2 more than doubled. And again, compelling companies. I'm actually sporting one today, RiftPay. Straight out of Dallas, Texas. And
Hafiz and Bryce.
Well done. Look at that memory isn't fading so fast.
Exactly.
Huh? So Hafiz and Bryce and their team out of Dallas from RiftPay have gotten just crazy great traction. They're working on a really cool split payment platform that they've been iterating on and are getting close to market launch themselves. So they, along with a number of others, were working on creative. We had a great, actually really hard decisions to make about who do we select because the application pool was quite compelling, which honestly, if I look at that, tells me that those people also very tenacious and scrappy and have a ton of grit because they could have said, we're in the middle of a pandemic. People aren't raising money, banks aren't bringing products to market, et cetera, but they didn't fold or give up at that time either. So very inspiring.
Yeah, it is. And you think about a time when the world felt so isolated and there was so much unknown in the world. I mean, for these early stage companies to not just fold up the tent and say, look, trudge on. And I think I give you and your team a ton of credit about this because it would have been easy for you guys to lose momentum and to lose excitement around it. And you didn't, they didn't. And I think cohort 2, as I look back on comparing cohort 2 with cohort 1, the types of products changed, but the excitement around what they were doing didn't change. And I think I've come to really expect, these founders come in with they are motivated, they are sure they've got the next big thing. They love constructive criticism, but they are incredibly determined. And so global pandemics don't scare them.
That's right. And so at the end of that one, the bookend of cohort 2, we brought cohort 1 back and we did our very first double demo day. So we debuted.
Now that was a party.
That Heather Berg might not be so excited about ever reliving the memories of that one again. But it was a ton of coordinating. It was a ton of activity. And we had a really good turnout for that double demo day.
You hit the limit on your Zoom call that day.
We did.
You hit the limit.
Text upon text saying, can't
get in.
And so we had to go back and real quick on the fly reconfigure some of the settings to try and, didn't expect the kind of results that we got. So that was really fascinating. Cohort 1, cohort 2 through the pandemic still got great results. We've got a person out of cohort 2 that's launching in T- any day with central payments for their full scale market launch. And so that's really exciting. And you had asked a question earlier, Trent, about how do you keep them excited and motivated when they see their fellow cohort members coming to market and maybe they're not. And what's interesting about Falls Fintech, and something I'm super proud of what we've done, is you do see a lot of accelerators do their thing and then wash their hands and say, hope we served you well, best of luck. And that's not to undercut what anybody's doing. That's just what they have to do because that's their model. For us, we stay tethered to these people until they're ready to go to market. You
told me this over lunch today. You have Josh from Permiso in cohort 1 coming out to hang in Sioux Falls for a week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. He'll be here. He'll be here very, very soon. And we'll spend a week here as he starts to build some more relationships in Sioux Falls. He's from LA and is coming here to just bunk up at the office. And so this alumni network it's unbelievably strong and it's unbelievably supportive of one another. I've got a company that just wrapped up in cohort 3 that has weekly calls with a cohort 2 person. And that's been interesting to watch that unfold. And I think it has to do with they see us more than a step in the right direction, but we are their kind of future direction as far as a strategic partner.
If you think about it, I'm glad you mentioned that because it was really in cohort 2 where this concept of entrepreneur in residence came up. And I talk a little bit about that because I think it all comes into this idea of mentoring and why you went to setting aside one of the positions in the cohort as an entrepreneur in residence.
Yeah. After every cohort, we spend a reasonable amount of time, actually I'd say a hefty amount of time debriefing. And we talk about the good, the bad, and the unexpected. What worked, what didn't, what should we do different? How do we need to shape this out differently? And with cohort 2, we said, look, if everybody is at somewhat of a same kind of stage, it's hard to help, how do you say this? Basically pull them along, bring them along. And so what we found in our application pool is there was 1 or 2 companies that really stood out as farther along, had been down the accelerator road before, maybe have launched a product and exited, or any combination thereof. And we thought, gosh, what would it look like if one of those companies came in and acted like the entrepreneur in residence? And it was actually Donald Hawkins with First Boulevard that we had first ideated on that idea of what that could look like. And it was fantastic.
And if you're in fintech and you're watching startups in fintech, everybody is watching what First Boulevard is doing.
Sure.
As we talk about this entrepreneur in residence, talk a little bit about what Donald and Asia brought to the table. We met Donald, as I recall, I had dinner with him in Kansas City as he was coming out of another accelerator on a whole nother project. And then Donald reached out and he's like, I'm working on this new thing. And you said, boy, he's my entrepreneur in residence. And, we knew when we had dinner with him, this guy's a rock star.
That's right.
Getting him, what did it mean to get Donald and his partner Asia into Falls Fintech?
Well, it certainly elevated the bar on what we were able to provide on-site mentoring, so to speak. Donald and Asia both wrapped their arms around these early stage companies, their fellow cohort members, like I've never seen before. It was remarkable how much Asia and Donald seemed to be invested in their fellow cohorts' success as much as their own. And they gave some really sage advice that they've never shied away from themselves. They are so mission focused, unapologetically building banking for Black America. The timing was right. Their conviction was right. They are the right people in general. And it was such an honor to help support getting them there. And so watching that happen underneath my nose, really, of cohort 2 made me say, I wonder what it would look like if this was an ongoing thing for every cohort going forward. May or may not happen. We certainly had it in cohort 3, and it proved to be just as fruitful as it was in cohort 2.
Yeah, and look, I can't say enough great things about First Boulevard. The handoff, we talk about all the time, the handoff from Falls Fintech to Central Payments, right? Accelerator to market launch. We're learning as we go too. Sure. I think we're farther along than about any bank in the country, but we all know there's things to do better. Having Asia and Donald as sort of our primary project to make that go well for future cohorts, incredibly valuable.
One of the best testimonials that I think we've gotten so far came out of a company in cohort 1 that said, probably my favorite thing about Falls Fintech is we celebrate each other's successes and we're not afraid to fail together. And I think that's a really important vibe that we continue to foster, because these entrepreneurs seeming to always have to have their face on, always pitching to the venture community, always trying to raise funds, always trying to look like they have it together. And there has to be a point in time where they can let that guard down a bit. And Falls Fintech is a safe place to do that. And it really serves them well. We lean in a little bit to founder health, mental health as far as entrepreneurs are concerned.
And that was such an eye-opening experience for me. I mean, I have been on the founder side of things a few times, and it is hard on the person, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard on the person's family. I think what you and Luke and Heather did in cohort 2 around how do we help these folks deal with adversity better as human beings.
That's right.
You always joke, I'm not the squishy one, but I think it speaks to the value of Falls Fintech immensely. So kudos as always.
Yeah, I mean, underneath all entrepreneur, put whatever label you want on it, is just a person. And I think we would do a disservice to that person if we didn't care for the whole package.
And in many cases, it's a person who hears the word no a lot.
Yeah, many times.
Who takes negative feedback, albeit most of the time very constructive, but who hears the
almost as much as I tell you no.
Almost. But they hear the negative so much more than they hear the positive. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, the positives are huge highs as well. So yeah, that was an awesome takeaway from cohort 2. We're going through sort of the debrief after cohort 2. And then we started to really think about, okay, we're behind this thing. Ownership's behind this thing. We see the tractions it's getting. We're learning things we can do better. Certainly on the central payment side, we were like, okay, where does the right baton, when's the right time for the baton to be passed to us? And how do we not allow these entrepreneurs to lose momentum coming out of Falls Fintech into central payments? But we started to really think about a lot of bigger stuff too, right, on what Falls Fintech looks like. Do we need to be thinking bigger than 2 5-company cohorts during the nicest weather in Sioux Falls, so we don't have to expose them to the not so nice weather? I mean, talk a little bit about what we learned coming out of 2 going into 3 and what that means for 4 and 5.
Well, look, some really fundamental changes are about to be announced.
Careful.
Which shall not be named at the moment. It's unbelievable how we're going to move this in 1 year from a seasonal accelerator for a few companies to something much bigger than that with a broader reach, serving many, many, many more. So I'm excited about it. Once again, I thought about maybe pushing you down into the mud a time or two. But once again, I gotta say, it's the right move. And it's been fun to watch that unfold and be a part of creating what's next.
You know, what's happening right now in this space, the founders come in with such an insatiable appetite to learn that you almost feel like at the end of 12 weeks, like there's so much more I could do.
Oh, there's so much more. And that's the thing is a lot of times they're still fundraising. And so how do we stay tethered to them in a meaningful way, not just a monthly check-in, but how do we give them something that they can expedite their fundraise, expedite their proof of concept in market? How do we actually get them to a point of accelerating market launch?
So cohort 3, interesting cohort in the sense that much less card-based. We noticed in the applicant pool, the groups that we selected. We selected one company that had applied in cohort 2, didn't make it, took great feedback from us, came back, we said, you're in, we're excited.
And he won the Maria Forrest Award, Perseverance Award. Were you going to go there? Did I just steal your thunder?
I wasn't going to go there yet, but I will go there because I love to talk about that. But, you know, I think cohort 3 is going to be the first one that really gets to have the first little sense of where Falls Fintech is going around the way in which we bring them live.
Careful.
I know, I'll be careful. The environment that we bring them live in and allowing them, you know, rather than, I have to be careful here.
Yeah, I just have to say, anybody who's listening that
I'm the worst
experiences FOMO, you're gonna
I'm the worst secret keeper on the planet.
So let's just let that be. How about
we'll save that one for another episode of Fintech Brews because much to talk about there.
Yeah. So look, I think at the end of the day, I would say getting to where we've gotten today has been a lot of trial and error. We have learned firsthand what it means to pivot, to be fluid, to be iterative. And I think that makes us more relatable to a lot of the startups that we pursue. So a lot of journey that we've laid behind us and so much more to come.
We're about entrenched relationships, right? Our mantra around here is, be essential. And we want our people to make sure our clients feel like we are an essential part of what they do. We want our Falls Fintech participants to look at us as being essential. And look, I think everything we're doing and all the projects we can't talk about yet that we're going to talk about very soon is all around this idea of creating embedded relationships with these companies, making sure they feel like we're essential, because that way, for some of these gaps in time as companies are out raising money and they're waiting to come to market and we're waiting for them to raise money, the bond stays strong. It stays strong between you and you and Luke and Heather with all the companies. And the bond's going to stay strong from a technology and bank issuing standpoint because we know what's going to happen. Like some of these companies they have too great of ideas that we know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
What a great discussion about Falls Fintech. I think we've taken the first 2 episodes of Falls Fintech Brews, brought the audience up to speed about where we are. I'm excited to not talk so much about us in future episodes, talk a lot about our partners, talk a lot about where we think the industry is going, talk a lot about fintech and bank as a service, topics that we love. But I think this has been great, kind of just bringing everybody up to speed on how we get where we are and then what we plan to do with that. So thanks for sharing so much about these great companies. And
my cup's empty.
Your cup is empty. We better go take care of that. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. There you have it. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Fintech Brews and News. Keep up with all the content and cool stuff happening at Falls Fintech and Central Payments by checking out our website, our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss out on our next episode.
I'm Nikkee and Rhody.
And I'm Trent Sorbe. See you next time.
Cheers.